Oh, thank you all for joining me very, very much. I appreciate it. It has been a crazy day, crazy week. As you can see, I don't have my green screen up. I'm framing a section off in my massive, not that massive, 1,200 square foot metal garage. I'm framing it in and getting insulation, more insulation instead of just the spray foam, because winter's coming and I want to be out here. And last year I got frozen out of my building. So I'm insulating it even more and closing a small office area. Hopefully it'll be done and looking beautiful here shortly. Kind of a weird thing that I just came across. This is last minute. I was looking like, what stories am I going to do? I got a couple I'm going to do. Let me go through what we're going to talk about today. Benny Johnson, of course, Dave Rubin, Tim Pool, exposed as working for alleged Russian influence operation. It's a very weird thing. So the Department of Justice supposedly, well, they definitely are going after content creators. But supposedly they're saying that they're Russian assets and they're doing Russian propaganda, which, so what? Last I knew with the First Amendment, you can, if somebody wants to pay you to talk, I mean, half our government or more, I'd say 90% of our government gets paid by the AIPAC, the AI PAC, which is Israel giving us money to talk nicely about them and do things that help them out. So why is it so bad that, I don't know, a couple of content creators get a little Russian money to speak their mind on things? But it doesn't even necessarily mean that they're speaking well of Russians. Here's as it is written by a leftist media from leftist media, MSN. Dave Rubin, Benny Johnson, Tim Pool exposed as working for alleged Russian influence operation in new DOJ indictment. It didn't really expose anything, but we'll get into that. A new Department of Justice indictment unsealed on Wednesday accuses a Tennessee-based content company with several high-profile right-wing personalities. That is incorrect. Tim Pool is not right-wing. On its roster of being part of a Russian influence operation working to infiltrate U.S. media with the Kremlin's propaganda. The indictment does not identify the company by name, but descriptions in the indictment match those of Tennessee-based Tenet Media, reported the Tennessean. Tenet Media's website declares fearless voices live here and describes itself as a network of heterodox commentators that focus on Western political and cultural issues. Creators currently listed on the site featuring in videos on its YouTube channels include Dave Rubin, Benny Johnson, Tim Pool, Lauren Southern, Taylor Hansen, and Matt Christensen. According to a DOJ press release regarding the unsealed indictment Wednesday, two Russian nationals, Kostiantin Kalishnikov, 31, also known as Kostya, and Elena Afranasyeva, 27, also known as Lena, were charged with conspiracy to violate the Foreign Agents Restriction Act, FARA, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. So basically, I think if you do, depending on what you do with your money and what's a good way I can put this? Depending on what you do with the money and your influence in the country, you need to register as a Foreign Agents Registration Act, which is part of what they're going after Hunter Biden for, if I remember correctly, because he was taking money from other countries and doing certain favors for people, but he hadn't registered on the Foreign Agents Registration Act. So I think that's part of what they're going after Hunter. They're going after Hunter Biden for. Kalishnikov and Afranasyeva were employed by RT, formerly known as Russia Today, a Russian state-controlled media outlet, according to the indictment, which describes how RT has launched several covert projects that are designed to shape public opinion in the U.S. and other Western countries, including this alleged funding and direction of a Tennessee-based online content creation company. Well, again, this is just me thinking outside the box here a little bit, but isn't news media like CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, CBS, all the rest of them, aren't they pretty much designed to shape public opinion in the West, in the U.S. and other Western countries? I mean, it's literally the same thing our media is doing. And the New York Times has taken money from China. as has CNN, I believe, allegedly. So if they're taking money from Russia and they're taking money from China, and they're saying positive things, what's the difference? I guess is my big argument. You know, what's the difference? Is it because they just aren't going along with what the state wants? The indictment goes on to allege that the defendants have deployed nearly $10 million, laundered that through a network of foreign shell entities to covertly fund and direct that Tennessee company. Okay, so if that's the truth, if they're saying that they deployed $10 million, laundered it through a network of foreign shell entities to covertly fund and direct that Tennessee company, then wouldn't it be fair to say that the Tennessee company, as well as these content creators like Benny Johnson and Tim Pool and maybe even Tenet Media or people working for Tenet Media, maybe they didn't know that this was actually being funded by RT? I think that's pretty safe to say. So of course, the leftists have jumped on this like a fat man on a donut, and they're just absolutely going nuts over this. They're very excited to say that Dave Rubin and Benny Johnson and Tim Pool and the rest of them are all obviously Russian. They're Russian propaganda. But if it's been rerouted, then they don't know. I mean, if Tenet Media reached out to me, for example, and said, "Hey, we'd like to sponsor your program or whatever," I'd be like, "Okay, yeah, I'm kind of down with that. Like, I could see that." Speaking of sponsors, let me quickly talk about the wellness company. You guys know I've been talking about this a lot recently, but man. Now you hear Dr. Fauci and the West Nile virus, and he got the West Nile virus, and there's 33 counties going into lockdown because of West Nile, and then they got the bird flu crap that's coming about, and then they got the bird flu summit that's coming out, and they're going to push something. I don't know what it is, but they've got to pull out absolutely everything. You know this. They're going to be pulling out bird flu. They're going to pull out all the stops. They have to. Well, the company, wellness company, when they reached out to me and they're like, check it out. Look, I know some of you don't agree necessarily with Drew Pinsky. Drew Pinsky was big on the jab. I still listen to Dr. Drew and Adam Carolla on the Adam Carolla show, and Drew was all in on it, and Adam wasn't. And Adam was trying to say, I'm not taking it, and Drew said, I did, and then he got hurt by it. And then he started looking into it, and he's like, okay, I changed my mind. So Peter McCullough, which I have high regard for, and Drew Pinsky, they're on the board of members of this stuff. Well, they got a contagion kit. It's got the good stuff. It's like toilet paper during the last lockdowns. Like, you never know you need it, but then when you need it, you can't get it. And that's kind of how that goes. But they've got this contagion kit, hydrochloroquine. Let me zoom out. Holy cow. My eyes are so bad. Where did it go? Ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, azithromycin, nebulizers with budesonide, which takes away inflammation in the chest, Tamiflu. It works on everything, guys. And they set up a page. You guys can go to twc.health /oddmanout, all one word. Go check out their contagion emergency kit. That's the one that I've got. And the contagion kit carries most of what the medical emergency kit carries, so I'm good there. But make sure to go out, grab one, get it before you need it. All the stuff is refillable. It's good to have on hand, and that way if they lock everything down and everybody's freaking out, you don't have to be freaking out as well. So go over to twc.health /oddmanout, get your kit, get covered. It's less than the cost of running to the doctor. You get all the meds you need. And it's refillable. It's available only here in the United States because we're awesome and the rest of the world is not. All right, continuing on. So comments from the top DOJ and FBI officials sharply denounced the alleged criminal scheme as covert attempts to sow division and trick Americans into unwittingly consuming foreign propaganda and to illegally manipulate American public opinion by sowing discord and division by co-opting online commentators by funneling them nearly $10 million to pump pro-Russia propaganda and disinformation across social media and U.S. audiences. The indictment alleges that Klishnikov and Afranasyeva directed the scheme from Moscow using multiple fake identities and shell companies. Okay, I'm going to pause right there. Okay, so if the indictment is saying that these two people used fake identities and shell companies, then it is not the fault of the content creators. That's not the fault of the content creators, because if they look into it, they're looking into a fake identity and shell company. You know, I'm not trying to cover, you know, provide cover for Dave Rubin or Tim Pool or Benny Johnson. I'm not trying to provide cover, but if the indictment in and of itself saying that they used fake companies and shell companies, you can't really blame the end receiver of that. They say the indictment, blah, 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 fake identity shell company, $10 million secretly financed and direct activities of the Tennessee company. We already said that, which included posting video content on multiple social media platforms that included TikTok, Instagram, X, and YouTube since the company launched in November 2023. The indictment alleges it has posted nearly 2,000 videos that have more than 16 million views just on YouTube. They say from the DOJ press release, many of the videos posted by U.S. Company -1, which they think is Tenet Media, such as immigration, inflation, and other topics related to domestic and foreign policy. While the views expressed in the videos are not uniform, most are directed to the publicly stated goals of the government of Russia and RT to amplify domestic divisions in the United States. So in other words, if somebody even like myself says, I don't like immigration, I don't like inflation, and it's all the fault of the current administration, are you saying that we're amplifying domestic divisions in the United States? Do you see how troublesome this is? Do you see how so this is going to be used to push more censorship on YouTube, more censorship on X, more censorship on TikTok, and they're going to say it's misinformation. It's very obvious what this is. They say in order to carry out RT's secret influence. You know what? Hold on a second. Damn it. Let me put this. I'm going to do a web search real quick. I can't find it right now. Damn it. I should have been smart and pulled this up ahead of time. I didn't have enough time today. I apologize. I apologize, everybody. I'm quite sure that there was CNN or New York Times or somebody that was getting some money from overseas. What's the difference? The difference is they were talking leftist points. They were talking in support of the regime. But if you speak out against the regime, that's troublesome. If you speak out for it, nothing to see here, because we're also in bed with China or whatever. They operated under covert identities, posing as an outside editor, and another one edited U.S. Company One content, monitored U.S. Company One's funding and hiring, and introduced Afanasayeva as a member of the purported editing team using the fake personas Helena Shudra and Victoria Pesti. Afranasayeva, God, I'm never going to get that name right, posted and directed the posting by U.S. Company One of hundreds of videos. The other one colluded information from and gave instructions to the staff. After the March 22nd, 2024 attack on a music venue in Moscow, Afranasayeva asked one of the U.S. Company One's founders to blame Ukraine and the United States for the event, writing, I think we can focus on the U.S.-Ukraine angle. The mainstream media spread fake news that ISIS claimed responsibility for the attack, yet ISIS itself never made such statements, blah, blah, blah. They go down through it. Both of those people remain at large. The charges against them are conspiracy to violate FARA. Well, and they have a statement about it, DOJ. Well, Benny Johnson came out with a statement. I think they have it here in the, I think they actually have it here. Benny says, a statement on the leaked DOJ indictment today. A year ago, a media startup, I actually have it, I have the whole thing pulled up here. A year ago, a media startup pitched my company to provide content as an independent contractor. Our lawyers negotiated a standard arm's length deal, which was later terminated. We are disturbed by the allegations in today's indictment, which makes clear that myself and other influencers were the victims of this alleged scheme. My lawyers will handle anyone who states or suggests otherwise. Man, it must be nice to make enough money to have a lawyer. That's all I'm saying. They have Tim Pool's statement here, which I also have in a little bit better printout. Tim says, my statement regarding allegations and the leaked DOJ indictment. Should these allegations prove true, I, as well as other personalities and commentators, were deceived and are being harmed. We're the victims. I cannot speak for anyone else at the company as to what they do or to what they are instructed. The Culture War podcast was licensed by Tenet Media. It existed well before any license agreement with Tenet, and it'll continue to exist after such any agreement expires. The only change with the agreement was the location of the live broadcast moved to Tenet's YouTube channel. Never at any point did anyone other than I have full editorial control of the show, and the contents of the show are often apolitical. Examples include discussing spirituality, dating, and video games. The show is produced in its entirety by our local team without input from anyone external to the company. TCW is a separate company not associated with timcast.com or any proprieties. It exists solely for the production of the Culture War podcast. That being said, we still do not know what is true, as these are only allegations. He says further, Putin is a scumbag, Russia sucks donkey balls, and to the journalists who wish to jump the gun, create their own narrative, or lie about what is currently going on, you can eat my Irish ass. So that's his official statement on it. And they say Rubin has not yet posted his own statement, but did retweet Pools and shared a tweet from another user with a screenshot of the indictment saying it accused Lauren Chen and her husband of having intentionally deceived the influencers mentioned below, seemingly Dave Rubin and Tim Pool, regarding the source of the funding. And this A.G. Hamilton thread, I have that whole thread. I will pull that up momentarily as well. So Ashley St. Clair says, the influencers named appear to have been deceived about funding sources by Lauren Chen, founder Tenet. Secondly, Lauren Chen, the alleged Russian agent receiving millions for propaganda, allegedly, has actively been discouraging votes for Trump and dividing the right, reading the indictment. The quartering, Jeremy over at the quartering, he said this looks very, very bad. The question is whether Watch Tenet Now creator made the video per their request. And they have a statement here where the two reached out and asked for them to cover the video that I was just talking about on the attack in Moscow. And then again, we have, and then I have, of course, Brett Baer, because he's lamestream news. AG says, so just to clarify, because I think it's important to note, the indictment alleges that the founders of the company, Lauren Chen and her husband, intentionally deceived the influencers mentioned below, seemingly Dave Rubin and Tim Pool, regarding the source of the funding. And that's reading the part that I had mentioned before about it being pseudonyms and fake names and fake company, all that stuff. Founder one is Lauren Chen, who gained these contracts when she worked for RT between March 2021 and February of 2022. He says when they were trying to sign the influencers who recognized some red flags, the fake person they sold as the main investor in France set up a meeting but mistakenly tried to show up to it at the Moscow time for meeting, then Googled the time in Paris. So apparently they were still on Moscow time, literally. The Russian agents were eventually not only suggesting content like blaming the March 2020 ISIS Moscow concert on Ukraine and the U.S., but also posting stuff themselves on Tenet Media platforms. Statements from Benny Johnson, Tim Pool, they've already mentioned that, and then they go on. Okay, so let me play the Brett Baer thing here, and then I'll give a summary on this. So here's the official announcement from super hyper conservative Fox News on the indictment.
Breaking tonight, the Justice Department accusing Russia of an effort to influence the 2024 presidential election. The accusation including disinformation campaigns, efforts to spread propaganda. But today there were also mentions of other foreign bad actors that are active. Correspondent David Spunt has details on the legal actions against the suspects. Good evening, David.
Brett, good evening. It's not just Russia, though. Russia was focused on in the indictment. The DOJ is putting several U.S. adversaries on notice ahead of the election in 2 months. The criminal indictment was unsealed just hours ago, charging 2 employees from RT, Russia Today, a state-run network with deep connections to the Kremlin, and Russian President Vladimir Putin himself. 2 company employees are accused of money laundering and failure to register as foreign agents. Attorney General Merrick Garland says the company created a $10 million scheme to expose U.S. voters to hidden Russian influence messaging through TikTok, Instagram, X, and YouTube. We reached out to RT for comment, and the company responded in part with the following: ha, 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 ha.
I'm sure that was much funnier in the original Russian, but for us, it's not funny. This is deadly serious, and we are going to treat it accordingly.
The DOJ and FBI also announced the seizure, Brett, of 32 internet domains that were allegedly spreading propaganda here in the U.S. FBI Director Wray also bluntly called out Iran and China as bad faith actors who were trying to interfere with our elections.
This is the thing about, and I'll let this finish in a second. This is the thing about, you notice that they keep blaming Russia for election interference and Iran in election interference and China in election interference, supposedly wanting Trump in there, which doesn't make any sense. Now, who are the countries that the mainstream media and our government is always warning about us about that are very, very bad and we definitely may need to possibly get into conflict with? That would be Russia, that would be Iran, and that would be China. If you remember, they said that Trump almost got taken out by somebody that snuck into the country. That person was from Iran. Isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that Iran pops up on the radar as a threat to the United States right about the time that we get into a conflict with, along with Israel and the Palestinians and Iran and the rest of it? Isn't it interesting how timing, all of a sudden out of nowhere, Iran pops into this? Here's the fact, and this is what the United States needs to take note, because apparently we have a lot of very warmongering, dumb people in charge of this country. The United States will not and should not take on Russia directly, because Russia, if they look like they're losing, they will probably get into World War III. Same thing with China, same thing with Iran. Maybe we should stop pretending that we're this global superpower when we're having to dock military vessels because there's not enough military personnel to put on them, and that we're short in recruiting, and that we've asked all the military members that got kicked out of the military or left because they didn't want to take the jab. Well, we're asking them to come back, and they're refusing to come back. There's a lot of special forces that we lost because those guys didn't want to take it. We're not in the position to walk around like the big dog on the block anymore. We're more like one of those nippy, really loud chihuahuas. So maybe you guys better settle the F down. Because this, you know, if we get into it with Iran, China and Russia may decide to jump in. You know, we're not in the place where we want this to happen. I'd love to say, America, yeah. We're not there. We're not there, especially if you've been watching our military recently and the state of our ships and the lack of our ability to keep them afloat.
Knock it off. As long as adversaries keep trying to influence and interfere in our society and our democratic processes, they're going to keep running into the FBI, and we're going to keep calling it out.
A federal election threats task force is also aiming to stop violence against election workers and public officials. The AG says since 2020, there's been, quote, unprecedented spikes in threats, and DOJ will find and prosecute anyone who brings harm. Separately, tomorrow, Brett, lawyers for former President Donald Trump will be in court in D.C. for his election interference case. Trump once again called for the case to be dropped. But today, the Attorney General said he has all the faith in Special Counsel Jack Smith, and we may find out if that case and when that case will actually go to trial tomorrow.
You know, I was on earlier talking about the contrast and what I heard from the Attorney General and the FBI Director on what Iran is doing and has done, and kind of what they laid out here with Russia.
Yeah, Iran has threatened to kill former President Trump. There have been active threats from Iran. And Russia is accused of this $10 million scheme to try to influence the elections. The questions are, will Iran see an indictment? DOJ is not ready to go forward and say Iran is going to be charged. Anybody from or connected to Iran will be charged. But Iran and China, Brett, are really on the top of the list for officials.
So you're going to tell me that Iran wants to terminate President Trump, and yet they're also trying to get him elected? You're going to tell me that Iran and China and Russia are all in bed together, but one of them is pushing one candidate and another is pushing a different candidate? Or that they're trying to sow division in the United States because, what, we need help doing that? That makes zero sense. So, yes, here's the way I see this. If you think about it, okay, I know for a fact, I've seen the stories, but I can't remember who the story was about. And so please do your research on this. This is all I can say. It was either CNN or it was New York Times or it was one of these news agencies that was getting money from, and I want to say it was China. I want to say it was allegedly China that was getting millions of dollars to post puff pieces on China and make it look like it was real news, when it was actually just a puff piece that was written by China for New York Times or CNN, whoever it was, to publish. What's the difference? The only difference I can see is because this isn't election interference. It's not election interference to pay somebody to say bad things about the opposition. Now, you can say, well, Russia shouldn't be doing that, and that's where they have to register as a foreign agent. But for them to pay somebody just to say, hey, Kamala sucks or Trump sucks, it happens all the time. That's why, as a matter of fact, we need to look into this Act Blue stuff, where you've got seniors that are on Social Security that are 85 years old, yet miraculously they've donated 17,000 times to the DNC for an average of $50 a donation, totaling $250,000. That's the kind of stuff you have to say, okay, we should be looking into that as well. So I went through a little bit of the indictment, the sealed indictment that they released. There's really not much here. My takeaway is this. I don't think Benny, I don't think Dave Rubin, I don't think Benny Johnson, I don't think Tim Pool, I don't think any of them really knew Tenet was getting funded by RT. You know, if there's a shell company and they hide everything, it does make it sound like Dave and Benny and Tim would actually be the ones kind of harmed in this. But in the same token, this is one of the reasons why you don't just jump at dollars. Look, I understand, and it's a fine line you have to walk. You know, you get sponsors, you get people that say, hey, I'd like to buy your channel, and I've gotten offers, and they get suckered in. I'm not saying that happened to Benny and Tim and Dave on this stuff, but you do have to look into who's sponsoring you, who's looking to buy you, who's looking to pay you, who wants to take what percentage of your work, and you got to be careful about that stuff. The problem with these guys is that Tenet Media gets one of them, and then they say, hey, Tim Pool, Benny Johnson's on board. Would you like to hop in? And then Dave hears, hey, Tim Pool and Benny are on board. And then Dave gets on, and they will use other people's names with some credibility to suck you into something you shouldn't be getting involved with. But in this case, even they themselves in the indictment say that it was fake people with fake financing and a shell company. To me, that takes all the fault off of these content creators. They just maybe should have done a little more due diligence, and I think that's that. The left is going to use this like crazy, of course, because that's what they do.